are not a gift. You believe one out of range. World. Or you can be it, so you have two paths. Instead, it got me. The world needed a hero.
What happens when a man with unstoppable power returns to a world that fears him? Join us as we break down Black Adam 2022, its biggest action moments, hidden facts, and shocking details. You're watching SONU HUB, where we bring you movie reviews, facts, and everything you need to know. Black Adam is a 2022 American superhero movie starring Dwayne Johnson as the main character. Black Adam. The movie is based on the DC Comics character Teth Adam, also known as Black Adam. It is a spin-off of Shazam from 2019 and the 11th movie in the DC Extended Universe, also known as the DCEU. The movie was directed by Jaume Collet-Serra, with the screenplay written by Adam Stickel, Rory Haynes, and Sohrab Noshirwani. The story follows Teth Adam, an ancient superhuman who has been trapped for thousands of years. He is finally released from his magical prison by a group of archaeologists. Once he is free, Black Adam sets out to protect the people of Kahndaq and help free the country from the control of Intergang, a powerful criminal organization. Intergang has taken control of Kahndaq and is causing serious trouble for its people. The local leader of the organization is also searching for an ancient and extremely powerful object known as the Crown of Sabak. The crown has a dark history and could give its owner incredible power. As Black Adam gets involved, he quickly becomes caught up in a much bigger battle between powerful forces. The movie features a large cast of actors in supporting roles. Aldis Hodge plays Hawkman, the leader of the Justice Society of America. Noah Centineo plays Atom Smasher, a young hero who can grow to an enormous size. Sarah Shahi plays Adriana Tomas, an archaeologist and resistance fighter who is determined to protect her people. Quintessa Swindell plays Cyclone, a young superhero with the ability to control wind and create powerful energy attacks. Marwan Kenzari plays Ishmael Gregor, while Pierce Brosnan plays Dr. Fate, one of the most experienced and powerful members of the Justice Society. Dwayne Johnson had been connected to the Shazam project during its early development. In September 2014, it was confirmed that Johnson would play the villain Black Adam. However, Johnson and the producers eventually decided that the character deserved to have his own movie instead of simply appearing as the main villain in Shazam. This decision eventually led to the development of a separate Black Adam movie. Adam Stickel was hired to write the screenplay in October 2017. A couple of years later, in June 2019, Jaume Collet-Serra officially joined the project as the director. At that time, the movie was planned for a December 2021 release. However, the production schedule was pushed back because of the COVID-19 pandemic. which caused major delays across the movie industry. More casting took place during the following year. One of the biggest additions was the Justice Society of America, with 4 of its members being introduced in the movie. The screenplay also went through additional rewrites, with Rory Haynes and Sohrab Nashirwani joining the writing team. Filming officially began in April 2021 and continued until August 2021. Most of the main filming took place at Trillith Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. Additional filming was also done in Los Angeles. The production was a major project featuring large action sequences, superhero battles, special effects, and a huge amount of visual effects work to bring Black Adam's powers and the world of Kahndaq to life. Black Adam had its world premiere in Mexico City on October 3, 2022. The movie was later released in theaters across the United States on October 21, 2022. Although the movie attracted plenty of attention because of Dwayne Johnson's involvement and the introduction of the Justice Society, critics gave it mixed reviews. The movie had a massive production budget estimated at around $190 million to $260 million. It earned approximately $393 million worldwide at the box office. Despite making hundreds of millions of dollars, the movie did not make enough money to fully break even because of its high production, marketing, and distribution costs. As a result, Black Adam was considered a box office disappointment. Even though the movie received mixed reactions from critics, it became a major part of the DCEU because it introduced Black Adam as one of its most powerful characters and brought the Justice Society of America into the franchise. The movie also became known for Dwayne Johnson's long journey to finally bring Black Adam to the big screen. In 2600 BC, the cruel King Akton, the ancient ruler of Kahndaq, wants to gain incredible power. To do this, he creates the crown of Sabak. But to finish the crown, he needs a rare and powerful mineral called Eternium. Since Eternium can be found in Kahndaq, Akheton enslaves his own people and forces them to dig for it. The miners eventually refuse to keep giving Eternium to Akheton. A young slave boy tries to convince them to trust their king, hoping the situation can be solved peacefully. But instead of listening to them, Akheton brutally kills the miners. After seeing what happened, the young boy decides to fight back. He leads a rebellion and manages to steal the Eternium back from the king. After the boy tries to lead the rebellion, the Council of Wizards chooses him and gives him the powers of Shazam. He is transformed into Teth Adam, the powerful champion of Kahndaq. With his new powers, Teth Adam takes on King Akton. By this point, Akheton has already completed the crown of Sabak and used its dark power. Teth Adam fights the king and eventually kills him, bringing his cruel rule to an end. Afterward, the wizards hide the crown of Sabak so that it can never fall into the hands of another human being. Thousands of years later, in the present day, Kahndaq is still suffering, this time under the control of Intergang, a powerful criminal organization. Adriana Thomas, an archaeologist and member of the resistance, is searching for the legendary crown of Sabak. She gets help from her brother Karim and their friends Samir and Ishmael. Adriana finally finds the crown, but before she can escape, Intergang soldiers ambush them. Samar is killed during the attack. With no other choice, Adriana reads an ancient spell that awakens Teth Adam from his long sleep. Teth Adam was once a slave from Kahndaq who was given the powers of several Egyptian gods. His son gave him these powers after Adam was badly injured by the soldiers of King Akton. His abilities include the stamina of Shu, the speed of Heru, the strength of Amon, the wisdom of Zehuti, the power of Aten, and the courage of Mehen. Adriana believes that Teth Adam is the legendary champion of Kandak who has finally returned after thousands of years, and she isn't wrong about his power. As soon as Adam wakes up, he goes after the Intergang soldiers and destroys most of them with ease. During the fight, one of the Intergang soldiers fires an Eternium rocket at Adam. The powerful attack knocks him out and leaves him unconscious. It is then revealed that Ishmael is secretly working with Intergang and wants the crown of Sabak for himself. Adriana takes the unconscious Adam back to her home and treats his injuries. While there, she notices an inscription inside the crown. It says, "Life is the only way to death." After several hours, Teth Adam wakes up. He quickly becomes friends with Adriana's young son, Amon. Amon explains that Adam has been asleep for about 5,000 years. He also tells Adam that Kandak has been invaded and controlled by different forces ever since he disappeared. Amon believes Kandak desperately needs a hero, and he believes Teth Adam is that hero. Adam doesn't really care what Amon or Adriana thinks. Instead, he walks out into the city on his own. Amon then purposely causes trouble with Intergang, hoping to get Adam's attention. His plan works and Adam shows up to protect him. Adam easily takes down the Intergang soldiers. Meanwhile, US government official Amanda Waller sees Teth Adam as a serious threat. She decides that someone powerful needs to stop him, so she contacts the Justice Society of America and orders them to bring Adam under control. The Justice Society includes several powerful heroes. Carter Hall, also known as Hawkman, is the leader of the Justice Society. He uses advanced weapons and armor made from ants metal, a powerful material that comes from another planet. Kent Nelson, also known as Dr. Fate, is one of the most experienced and respected members of the Justice Society. He uses the Helmet of Fate, which gives him powerful magical abilities. Nelson discovered the tomb of Nabu the Wise while working with his archaeologist father. He eventually came into contact with a magical helmet from another dimension. The helmet chooses its own user, and after Nelson was chosen, he learned to control its powers and became the superhero known as Dr. Fate. Maxine Hunkel, also known as Cyclone, is one of the younger members of the Justice Society. When she was young, she was experimented on and injected with nanotechnology. This gave her the ability to control and manipulate the wind. She is also the granddaughter of Abigail Ma Hunkel, also known as Red Tornado, and wants to continue her family's superhero legacy. Albert Rothstein, also known as Atom Smasher, is another young member of the Justice Society. He has a meta-human ability that allows him to control his molecular structure. Because of this power, he can change his size and increase his strength. The Justice Society arrives just in time to stop Adam's violent attack on Intergang. However, stopping him isn't easy. Teth Adam proves to be incredibly powerful and manages to defeat the Justice Society's warriors. The people of Kandak begin seeing Adam as their champion, but during the battle, Dr. Fate realizes that Adriana has the crown of Sabak. The Justice Society manages to stop Adam for a short time, but he escapes and heads toward the ruins of Acton's old palace. The Justice Society later explains the truth to Adriana. According to them, Teth Adam wasn't a peaceful hero who was simply waiting to save Kahandak. He was actually a dangerous and extremely angry killer whose rage almost destroyed the entire country. Because of this, the wizards imprisoned him to make sure he could never cause that kind of destruction again. They also explain that if they can somehow make Adam say the word Shazam, he will lose all of his powers. Meanwhile, the crown of Sabak is given to Amon for safekeeping, and he takes it back home. But when he gets there, Ishmael is already waiting with Karim. Ishmael finally shows his true colors. He reveals that he is the leader of Intergang's conduct division. He also kidnaps Ammon because Ammon has stolen and hidden the crown of Sabak. Adriana and the Justice Society meet with Adam and try to convince him that he can become a true hero for conduct. But before they can finish talking, Ammon calls Adriana for help. Adriana begs Adam to save her son. Adam immediately rushes to rescue Ammon. However, Ishmael manages to escape with Ammon on an Eternium powered bike. Adam tries to chase them and fights several Intergang soldiers riding bikes, but he isn't able to save Ammon right away. Adam eventually returns to Adriana's house. At the same time, Hawkman captures two Intergang members and tries to question them about the location of their hideout. Adam isn't exactly known for being patient. He uses his own brutal method of interrogation and quickly gets the information he needs. Hawkman becomes angry because he doesn't agree with Adam's violent methods. The two heroes begin arguing and fighting. During the chaos, they discover something important. Ammon had hidden the crown of Sabak right in front of everyone. Teth, Adam, Adriana, and the Justice Society find the crown and decide to use it to make a deal with Ishmael. They plan to give him the crown in exchange for Ammon's life. When they finally reach Ishmael, he reveals another shocking secret. He is the last descendant of King Acton. Ishmael also explains that the power of Sabak comes from 6 of the most powerful demons in hell: Satan, Am, Belial, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, and Creates. He believes these powers make him the rightful ruler of Kahndaq, and he wants to take the throne for himself. Adriana willingly gives Ishmael the crown of Sabak because she wants to save Ammon, but Ishmael has no intention of keeping his promise. He betrays them and shoots at Ammon. Seeing Ammon in danger causes Adam to completely lose control. He unleashes his full power and destroys the entire hideout. Ishmael is killed in the destruction while Ammon is badly wounded. Filled with guilt, Adam runs away to the ruins of Acton's old palace. There he finally tells Hawkman the truth about what really happened thousands of years ago. The legend of Kahndaq's champion was never actually about Tith Adam. It was about his son Hurut. Hurut was the one who received the powers of Shazam and became Kahndaq's true champion. Because Hurut was almost impossible to defeat, King Acton ordered assassins to kill Hurut's family, including his mother and Adam. Hurut knew that his father was in danger, so he gave his powers to Adam in order to save his life. But the moment Hurut lost his powers, Acton's assassins killed him. Adam was completely devastated and furious. He went on a massive rampage and killed all of the king's soldiers. His rage became so powerful that he accidentally destroyed Acton's entire palace. Afterward, the Council of Wizards decided that Adam was no longer worthy of their power. Furious and consumed by anger, Adam attacked the council and killed almost all of the wizards, with Shazam being the only one who survived. The wizards then imprisoned Adam and hid the crown of Sabak inside what would eventually become Adam's tomb. After remembering everything he has done, Adam realizes that he may never be the hero everyone expects him to be. He finally surrenders. Adam says the word Shazam and instantly loses his powers. The Justice Society takes him to a secret underwater Task Force X facility in Antarctica. There, Dr. Fate has a disturbing vision of Hawkman's future and sees that Hawkman is going to die. Ted Adam is placed into suspended animation and submerged underwater so that he can't speak another word and accidentally regain his powers. The Justice Society heads back toward Kahndaq, but they soon realize something terrible. Ishmael wanted Adam to kill him by wearing the crown of Sabak and intentionally provoking Adam. Ishmael made sure that his death would allow him to be reborn as Sabak. Ishmael rises from the underworld as Sabak, the champion of the six powerful demons, and returns to Kandak to claim the throne for himself. Sabak summons an army from hell and sends the undead forces across Kandak, terrorizing the people. Amon, Adriana, and Karim rally the citizens and encourage them to fight back against the undead army. Meanwhile, the Justice Society tries to stop Sabak, but they are unable to defeat him. Dr. Fate realizes that there may be only one way to stop Sabak. He creates a magical force field around the ruins, preventing the other members of the Justice Society from entering. He then reveals that Hawkman's death can be prevented, but only if Fate sacrifices himself. Dr. Fate stays behind and faces Sabak alone. While fighting, Fate uses his astral projection powers to reach Death Adam, who is still trapped in his underwater suspended animation. Fate speaks to Adam and helps free him from his frozen state. Back in Kandak, Sabak eventually kills Dr. Fate. The moment Fate dies, the magical force field disappears. Hawkman immediately enters the ruins and faces Sabak. Atom Smasher and Cyclone stay behind to protect the civilians and help the people of Kandak. Sabak quickly overpowers Hawkman and nearly defeats him. But just when things look hopeless, Teth Adam arrives. Adam joins Hawkman in the final battle against Sabak. Hawkman uses Dr. Fate's helmet, giving him access to Fate's powerful magic. Working together, Hawkman and Adam finally get the upper hand. In the end, Teth Adam kills Sabak and saves Kandak from the demonic ruler. After the battle, the Justice Society and Adam part ways on good terms. Adam destroys the old throne because he believes Kandak doesn't need another king. It needs a protector. Amanda Waller then contacts Adam and warns him not to leave Kandak. Adam refuses to be controlled and makes it clear that he will do things his own way. Then, just when everything seems to be over, a mysterious figure arrives. Superman appears. He tells Adam that they need to talk. Casting Dwayne Johnson as Death Adam Black Adam, Dwayne Johnson as attachment to the role of Death Adam, later known as Black Adam, formed the foundational casting decision for the entire project. Johnson first publicly confirmed his involvement with the character in September 2014, at a time when the character was still expected to appear as an antagonist within a larger Shazam film. Over subsequent years, as development shifted toward a standalone feature centered on the anti-hero, Johnson's dual position as star and producer through Seven Bucks Productions gave him significant influence over the direction of casting. The physical demands of the role were considerable. Black Adam required a performer capable of conveying both ancient menace and contemporary charisma, while enduring extensive practical and digital effects work. Johnson's well-documented training regimen and on-screen physicality made him a natural fit, and production accounts describe the DJ effect, in which co-stars arriving for pre-production found themselves intensifying their own conditioning to match the standard he set. Benjamin Patterson served as the body double for the pre-powered, emaciated version of Death Adam. Johnson's facial performance was then digitally composited onto Patterson's physique for those sequences, requiring precise motion capture and lighting setups, including long sessions inside specialized camera arrays known as the Egg. This technical approach underscored how central Johnson's likeness and performance were to the character's dual presentation, first as a broken slave and then as the empowered anti-hero. Johnson's producing role also shaped the tone of subsequent casting. He personally placed the call to Aldis Hodge to offer the part of Hawkman. An anecdote repeatedly cited by Hodge as a surreal and memorable moment in which the actor initially struggled to believe the offer was genuine. The decision to center the film on Johnson's interpretation of Black Adam as a figure of rage-tempered justice rather than straightforward villainy influenced the types of performers sought for the opposing Justice Society. Actors who could hold their own against Johnson's presence while embodying contrasting philosophies of heroism. Aldis Hodge as Carter Hall Hawkman. Aldis Hodge was cast as Carter Hall Hawkman in September 2020, becoming one of the earliest major supporting announcements after Nova Centineo. Hodge brought prior experience with physically demanding and dramatic roles, including work in One Night in Miami and The Invisible Man, and production notes emphasize the transformation he underwent for the part. Upon arriving for pre-production, Hodge had already bulked up substantially, prompting comments from producers about the intensity of his preparation. Hawkman's nth metal weaponry and large practical wings required both athletic capability and an ability to convey leadership and moral opposition to Black Adam's methods. Hodge's casting was described by producers as a key piece in rounding out the Justice Society with a beloved, well-known character, chemistry and physical presence. Opposite Johnson were prioritized. Hodge's Hawkman functions as the primary ideological counterweight, arguing against lethal force in a film that otherwise leans into Black Adam's unrestrained power. The practical wings, constructed with lightweight carbon fiber elements, demanded additional physical control during filming, further justifying the selection of an actor already committed to the physical side of the role. Noah Centineo as Albert Rothstein, Atom Smasher. Noah Centineo was the first Justice Society member announced, joining in July 2020 as Atom Smasher. Producers specifically sought a younger performer who could inject freshness and a sense of new generation perspective into the team. Centineo, previously known for romantic comedy leads, underwent the same conditioning expectations associated with Johnson's productions. Atom Smashers' size-shifting powers required extensive visual effects collaboration, and Centineo's casting was framed as an opportunity to represent a less jaded, more optimistic strain of heroism. Chemistry reads with Quintessa Swindell were conducted to ensure the Atom Smasher Cyclone pairing felt authentic. Producers later described the on-screen rapport as a casting home run that captured Gen Z optimism rarely centered in large-scale superhero ensembles. Centineo's relative youth also served narrative purposes, positioning Atom Smasher as a newer recruit whose worldview contrasts with both Black Adam's ancient trauma and Dr. Fate's long experience. Quintessa Swindell as Maxine Hunkel. Cyclone Quintessa Swindell was cast as Cyclone in December 2020. Swindell's selection emphasized both acting ability and the capacity to embody a character whose powers, wind manipulation derived from experimental nanotechnology, demanded a blend of physical performance and effects work. Producers highlighted the chemistry sessions conducted with Centineo, noting that the pairing was deliberately tested rather than left to chance. Swindell's prior work in projects such as Voyagers and Trinkets demonstrated range, and the role of Cyclone allowed the film to introduce a younger female Justice Society member whose familial connection to the Red Tornado legacy added generational texture. Production commentary stressed Swindell's serious approach to studying the character and bringing an authentic interpretation to the screen. The decision to pair Cyclone and Atom Smasher as relative newcomers created a dynamic of mutual support and discovery that balanced the heavier presence of Hawkman and Dr. Fate. Pierce Brosnan as Kent Nelson Dr. Fate. Pierce Brosnan's casting as Dr. Fate, announced in late March 2021, was widely regarded as a significant late-stage addition that elevated the ensemble. Director John Collett-Serra and the producing team identified Brosnan as a first-choice selection for a character described as a legend, requiring gravitas that could be delivered with subtlety rather than overt force. Collett-Serra noted that Dr. Fate's immense power and long history demanded an actor capable of projecting quiet authority and magnetic presence. Brosnan's established screen persona, including his tenure as James Bond, supplied precisely that quality. Brosnan himself later expressed that he had long wondered whether a comic book role would ever come his way and was pleased to join a project of this scale. He collaborated on design elements of the helmet of Fate and described the costume and helmet as both a blessing and a burden that required physical and mental energy. Motion capture elements were incorporated into the performance, adding another layer of technical demand. Co-stars repeatedly praised Brosnan's professionalism and warmth on set, with Sarah Shahi and Aldis Hodge offering public comments on his legendary status and collaborative spirit. His presence provided the wisdom of experience that producers felt the Justice Society needed to counterbalance the younger members and Johnson's intensity. Sarah Shahi as Adriana Thomas. Sarah Shahi joined the cast in October 2020 as Adriana Thomas, the archaeologist and resistance fighter whose actions helped free Black Adam. Shahi's casting brought dramatic experience from television and film work, including roles that required both emotional range and physical commitment. Adriana functions as a moral and emotional anchor within Kandak's storyline, and Shahi's performance was positioned to ground the larger-than-life superhero elements. Producers cited her as part of the strong supporting ensemble assembled around Johnson. Her character's relationship to the crown of Sabak and her determination to protect her people gave the film a human-scale perspective amid the god-level conflicts. Marwan Kenzari as Ishmael Sabak King Akhton. Marwan Kenzari was cast in early 2021 in the multi-layered role of Ishmael, who becomes Sabak and is connected to the ancient King Akhton. Kenzari's previous work in Aladdin and The Old Guard demonstrated an ability to portray complex, sometimes antagonistic figures with physicality and intensity. The dual or triple nature of the role required an actor capable of shifting between contemporary and ancient contexts, as well as conveying the transformative power of the crown of Sabak. Production notes place Kenzari among the key supporting players who expanded the film's roster of formidable opponents and historical ties. Supporting cast and ensemble players. Bodhi Sabongi was cast as Amon Thomas, Adriana's son, a role described as significant within the comics-inspired narrative. Sabongi's performance provided emotional stakes tied to the younger generation of Kandak. Mohammed Amr portrayed Karim, Adriana's brother, contributing both dramatic and occasional lighter moments. James Kusati Moyer appeared as Samir, another member of the resistance circle. Jalon Christian played Hurut, the young figure central to Black Adam's origin. Odelia Halevi appeared as Shiruta, and Uli Latukefu, who had previously worked with Johnson on Young Rock, took the role of the champion. These supporting performers were selected to populate Kahandak with a sense of community and history, ensuring that the human cost of oppression and liberation remained visible. Jennifer Holland's appearance as Emilia Harcourt connected the film to the broader DC extended universe through Amanda Waller's apparatus. Henry Winkler made a brief appearance as Uncle Al, adding an unexpected familiar face. Jimon Honsu provided the voice and presence of one of the Council of Wizards, while additional wizard roles were filled by Raj Kala, E. Lloyd Napier, Kiara Rashon, Onyeme Aquari, Sana Erica, Vince Canlas, and Tonia Stewart. These casting choices for the ancient sequences helped establish the mythic tone of Black Adam's origin. Uncredited and cameo appearances, Viola Davis appeared uncredited as Amanda Waller, continuing her established portrayal and linking the events of Black Adam to the larger intelligence and superhero oversight apparatus of the DCEU. Henry Cavill's uncredited appearance as Superman in a post-credits sequence represented a hard-won casting victory. Production accounts describe persistent efforts by Johnson, Danny Garcia, and Hiram Garcia to secure Cavill's return despite internal resistance. The scene was ultimately filmed and included, providing a high-profile bridge to potential future conflicts. These cameos were carefully managed to maximize impact while preserving surprise. Casting process and production philosophy. The casting process for Black Adam was iterative and influenced by Johnson's producing team at Seven Bucks Productions alongside Beau Flynn and others. Producers described assembling the Justice Society as one of the most enjoyable aspects of preparation. Noah Centineo's early casting set a template for injecting youth. Subsequent selections of Hodge and Swindell built outward from that foundation. Chemistry reads between Centineo and Swindell were unusually thorough for the scale of the production, reflecting a deliberate effort to ensure interpersonal dynamics would translate on screen. Pierce Brosnan's late addition was treated as a major win that completed the ensemble with necessary gravitas. Physical preparation was a consistent expectation across the principal cast. Actors arriving for pre-production were expected to meet elevated fitness standards, a culture attributed directly to Johnson's influence. Director John Collet-Serra collaborated closely with the cast on character details, including costume and helmet design for Dr. Fate. The overall approach prioritized performers who could balance spectacle with character-driven conflict, particularly the central philosophical clash between Black Adam's ends justify the means worldview and the Justice Society's more restrained code. Supporting roles filled out the world of Kandak and the ranks of Intergang, ensuring that both the oppressed population and the antagonistic forces felt populated by distinct faces rather than anonymous extras. Physical and technical demands. Across the cast beyond Johnson's dual performance requirements, several roles imposed specialized technical demands. Hawkman's wings involved practical backpacks and effects coordination. Atom Smasher and Cyclone's powers relied heavily on visual effects that had to be performed against, requiring precise timing and physical commitment. Dr. Fate's magic, designed with refractive crystalline aesthetics and Ankh motifs, involved motion capture elements and careful collaboration between actor and effects teams. These technical layers influence casting by favoring actors comfortable with the hybrid, practical digital workflow common in contemporary superhero filmmaking. Ensemble dynamics and character contrasts. The final ensemble was structured to create clear contrasts. Johnson's ancient traumatized anti-hero against a multi-generational justice society. The grounded human resistance of Adriana, Amon and Karim against both Intergang and the arriving heroes, and the mythic weight of Dr. Fate and the Wizards against the street level and mid-tier conflicts. Casting decisions consistently reinforced these contrasts. Younger performers brought energy and relative inexperience. Veteran performers supplied authority and history. Johnson supplied the gravitational center around which the rest of the cast orbited. Additional ensemble and background roles, say, large supporting and background cast filled out intergang operatives, Kandaki residents, ancient laborers, and military or mercenary figures. Performers such as Joseph Gatt, intergang squad leader, various helicopter and checkpoint mercenaries, and numerous uncredited residents and workers contributed to the film's sense of scale. Casting directors sought a range of ethnicities and ages to reflect the fictional nation of Kandak and the multinational nature of Intergang's operations. Practical considerations of filming locations, including Atlanta area production, also shaped the pool of available background talent. The cumulative effect of these casting choices was an ensemble capable of supporting a narrative that moved between intimate human drama, large-scale action, and mythic confrontation. Each principal performer was selected not only for individual suitability, but for how their presence interacted with Johnson's central performance and with one another, creating a layered cast that could sustain the film's dual focus on Black Adam's personal journey and the broader introduction of the Justice Society. Production development and pre-production. The road toward Black Adam stretches back much further than its eventual 2022 premiere, and its origins are tightly interwoven with the far longer development saga of Shazam. Few modern studio tentpoles carry a development history quite as long or as circuitous as this one. What eventually reached theaters in October 2022 had, in one form or another, been kicking around Warner Brothers and New Line's development slate for close to 2 decades. Surviving multiple changes in studio leadership, shifts in the broader superhero film marketplace, and an eventual global pandemic that reshaped how the entire industry approached scheduling and production, New Line Cinema, the genre-focused arm of Warner Bros., first began working on a feature built around the DC Comics character, then known as Captain Marvel, in the early 2000s. Because Marvel Comics already held the trademark on the name Captain Marvel for its own hero, the studio ultimately built its branding around the wizard who grants the boy hero his abilities, Shazam, a naming workaround that would shape how the franchise was marketed for years afterward. Director Peter Segal became attached to the project in the spring of 2006, and later that year the studio began courting Dwayne Johnson for a role in the film. Initially, discussions centered on Johnson potentially playing the boyish hero himself, but by the tail end of 2007, his interest had shifted toward the film's villain Black Adam, the corrupted former champion whose power rivals the hero's own. Johnson later said fan reaction to the idea of him playing the antagonist was encouraging, a response that would end up mattering a great deal to the eventual shape of the franchise. Like many comic book projects of that era caught between corporate reshuffling and shifting industry appetites, the Shazam film, stalled by early 2009 development, had effectively been shelved. This period predated the modern era of interconnected cinematic universes that Marvel Studios would soon popularize with Iron Man and its subsequent Avengers building slate. And without that connective framework in place, a mid-tier DC property built around a lesser-known hero and his even lesser-known nemesis struggled to secure the sustained studio backing needed to move from script development into active production. The project did not resurface in earnest until 2014, when Warner Bros. And DC began mapping out a broader interconnected slate of superhero films that would become known as the DC Extended Universe (DCEU). That August, Johnson confirmed He remained attached to the Shazam property, but had not yet settled on which of the two roles, hero or villain, he would ultimately take. The ambiguity did not last long. Within a month, in September 2014, Johnson publicly announced that he would be portraying Black Adam. For his eventual involvement in the finished film, Johnson was paid $22.5 million, a figure indicative of how central his star power had become to the project's identity by the time it reached the screen. That salary placed Johnson among the higher earning leading actors of his era, reflecting a broader industry trend in which a small handful of proven box office draws could command outsized compensation packages for anchoring a studio's tentpole releases, particularly for properties considered financially risky or unproven at the box office. A pivotal turning point arrived in January 2017. Johnson met with DC Films executive Jeff Johns to discuss the direction of the still developing Shazam project. Studio executives had grown uneasy with the notion of using an actor with Johnson's box office draw and public profile purely as a supporting villain in someone else's origin story. Rather than continue down that path, the decision was made to split the property into two separate films entirely: Shazam, which would focus on the teenage hero Billy Batson and was released in 2019, and a standalone Black Adam film built around Johnson's title anti-hero. Johnson indicated at the time that he expected the two characters to eventually cross paths on screen in some future installment. By July of that year, Johns publicly confirmed that Johnson would not be appearing in Shazam itself. Although the finished film would still nod to the character, the wizard Shazam conjures a magical hologram bearing Black Adam's likeness as a warning to Billy about the dangers of misused power. The decision to split the two characters into separate films was, in retrospect, a fairly significant strategic gamble. Studios are typically reluctant to spin off a villain or morally ambiguous secondary character into their own standalone vehicle without first establishing that character within an existing successful franchise, since doing so requires convincing an audience to invest in an anti-hero with no prior on-screen introduction. By committing to build an entire film around Black Adam without ever having shown him in live action, Warner Brothers and New Line were effectively betting that Johnson's own star power would be sufficient to carry the film, regardless of how unfamiliar the character might be to mainstream moviegoers who had not read the source comics. With the two projects now formally separated, screenwriter Adam Satikiel was brought on in October 2017 to draft the Black Adam screenplay. Johnson set up the project to be produced through his own Seven Bucks Productions alongside Danny Garcia and Hiram Garcia in partnership with Beau Flynn of Flynn Picture Co. At this stage in development, there was actually a plan for Johnson's Black Adam to make his screen debut in a much smaller capacity as a supporting element within the sequel to 2016's Suicide Squad, which had Gavin O'Connor attached to write and possibly direct. The concept involved the Suicide Squad characters pursuing what they believed to be a weapon of mass destruction, which would later be revealed to be Black Adam himself, giving Johnson a limited but attention-grabbing appearance. These plans were abandoned, however, once O'Connor departed that project in 2018, clearing the way for Black Adam to remain fully contained within his own solo film. Stakiel delivered a completed script draft by April 2018, at which point Johnson expressed optimism that filming could begin as early as 2019. By the end of August that year, Stakiel had turned in a further revised draft with additional work ongoing. Producer Hiram Garcia used this period to emphasize that separating Shazam and Black Adam into their own films allowed each character's story to be developed on its own terms. And he made clear that the studio had no intention of watering down Black Adam's harder edges to make him more palatable to a broad audience. The character, he stressed, was not a conventional do-gooder hero, but someone willing to respond to provocation with lethal force. Despite this early momentum, Johnson cautioned in December 2018 that filming was unlikely to start before the end of 2019 at the earliest, largely because of scheduling conflicts tied to his commitments to Jumanji, The Next Level and Red Notice. Scheduling bottlenecks of this kind were a recurring theme throughout the years leading up to Black Adam's eventual production. Johnson's status as one of the most in-demand leading men in the industry meant that his calendar was consistently booked years in advance across multiple studios and franchises, and any single project built around him as the soul above the title star was almost by necessity going to be at the mercy of whatever else he had already committed to filming first. Following the commercial success of Shazam, in the spring of 2019, Black Adam was elevated to a priority production for New Line. By June of that year, filmmaker Jean Collet-Serra entered talks to direct, having impressed Johnson through their collaboration on the Disney adventure film Jungle Cruise. Collet-Serra would go on to frame his vision for the character through a memorable comparison, describing Black Adam as essentially a superhero genre analog to Dirty Harry, a figure operating in a world he sees as corrupt and unfair, willing to bypass conventional rules of justice to get results. He also promised that the finished film would show a considerably darker and more morally ambiguous side of Johnson than audiences had seen in the comedic family-friendly Jungle Cruise. The pairing of Johnson and Collet-Serra was, in that sense, something of a deliberate image pivot for the actor, who by the late 2010s had become closely associated in the public eye with broadly likable PG-13 family adventure roles across franchises like Jumanji and Jungle Cruise. Attaching himself to a considerably more violent, morally compromised anti-hero represented an attempt to demonstrate a different register of leading man performance, one closer to the harder-edged action stars of earlier film eras than to the family-friendly persona he had cultivated through much of the preceding decade. That October, Johnson revealed that production was expected to begin in July 2020, and the following month he announced a target theatrical release date of December 22, 2021. At this stage, he also clarified an important structural decision. The wizard Shazam himself would not appear as a character within Black Adam, but the film would instead introduce several members of the Justice Society of America, JSA, to the DCEU, laying groundwork for a wider ensemble of heroes beyond the core Justice League. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted these plans almost immediately. In mid-April 2020, Johnson confirmed that filming had been pushed back because of the pandemic, with the production now aiming to begin sometime around August or September of that year instead. By July 2020, the expected start date had slipped again, with filming now anticipated for early 2021 in Atlanta, Georgia, a hub that had become a preferred production base for numerous major studio films because of its favorable tax incentives and extensive soundstage infrastructure. Georgia's rise as one of the busiest film production centers in North America over the preceding decade had made it a natural home for large-scale genre production of exactly this type, and Trilith Studios in particular had, by the early 2020s, become closely associated with major franchise filmmaking, hosting numerous large-scale productions in the years surrounding Black Adam's own shoot. That same month, actor Noah Centineo joined the cast in the role of Atom Smasher, one of the JSA members Johnson had teased. During the virtual DC Fandom event in August 2020, a format necessitated by pandemic-era restrictions on large in-person gatherings, Johnson used the platform to formally reveal which JSA characters would populate the film. Alongside Atom Smasher, the roster would include Hawkman, Doctor Fate, and Cyclone. He later explained that Hawkgirl had originally been part of the planned lineup but had to be dropped for reasons that were, in his words, complicated, with Cyclone ultimately taking her place in the ensemble. Straight writers Rory Haynes and Sohrab Noshirwani had produced a new draft of the script by September 2020, the same month in which Aldis Hodge was cast in the pivotal role of Hawkman, the JSA's de facto leader in the film. Colette Serra continued to elaborate publicly on his Dirty Harry framing around this time, describing the appeal of a character willing to cut through what he saw as systemic corruption and dispense justice unbound by the usual rules, a dynamic he felt resonated broadly with audiences who perceived the world as fundamentally unfair. Johnson, for his part, offered his own gloss on the character's moral framework, noting that the black in Black Adam refers to the state of the character's soul, and describing Adam's worldview as narrow and uncompromising, a man who sees no room for being wrong, no space for other people's perspectives, and no path forward except the constant justification of his own actions through the lens of his personal pain. This characterization of Adam as a fundamentally traumatized figure whose worldview had calcified around a single formative loss became a recurring through line across the film's marketing and press coverage in the months leading up to release, positioning the character less as a conventional supervillain and more as a tragic anti-hero whose capacity for violence stemmed directly from grief left to fester unchecked across millennia of imprisonment. That framing gave the film's marketing team a clear thematic hook to build around, distinguishing the character from more straightforwardly villainous DC antagonists and instead aligning him tonally with morally grey anti-heroes who had found success in other franchises during the same period. The following month, October 2020, Warner Brothers was forced to reshuffle its broader release calendar because of the still ongoing pandemic, and Black Adam was left without a confirmed release date as a result. Later that same month, Sarah Shai joined the cast as Adriana Thomas, the archaeologist and resistance fighter who serves as one of the film's key human-scale protagonists. Quintessa Swindell was cast in December 2020 as Cyclone, and Marwan Kenzari joined the ensemble in February 2021 in the dual role of Ishmael Gregor and the ancient tyrant Acton. Filming was at that point expected to begin in April 2021, and construction on the physical sets began by mid-March of that year in preparation. Pierce Brosnan was cast at the end of March 2021 as Kent Nelson, the JSA's veteran sorcerer known as Dr. Fate, rounding out the primary ensemble of superpowered characters. Around the same time, the studio set a new release date of July 29, 2022. Throughout April 2021, several more actors joined the production in previously undisclosed roles, including James Kusati Moyer, Body Sabongui, Mo Amar, and Uli Latukefu. Latukefu had previously worked with Johnson on the biographical comedy series Young Rock, while Sabongui's character was described at the time as holding particular significance drawn directly from the Black Adam comics. taken together, the casting rollout across late 2020 and into the spring of 2021 reflects the methodical, staggered approach typical of large ensemble superhero productions, in which a studio reveals its cast piece by piece over many months to sustain ongoing media coverage and fan speculation rather than announcing the full roster all at once. Each individual casting announcement, Hodge as Hawkman, Shahi as Adriana, Swindell as Cyclone, Kanzari in his dual role, Brosnan as Dr. Fate, generated its own dedicated cycle of trade press coverage and fan reaction across the better part of a year, functioning as a kind of extended pre-release marketing campaign long before any trailer footage had been shown publicly. One of the more unusual elements of the production's late development involved the eventual return of Henry Cavill as Superman for a brief but significant mid-credits appearance. This marked the first time Cavill had shot new material as the character since 2017's Justice League. Johnson later stated that his own production company, Seven Bucks, himself along with Danny Garcia and Hiram Garcia, played a central role in brokering the renegotiations between Warner Brothers and Cavill that made the cameo possible. According to Johnson's account, he originally pitched the idea of bringing Cavill back to then DC Films president Walter Hamada, who turned the idea down because he had other plans in mind for future Superman-focused projects. It was only through Johnson's continued mediation that Cavill, who was at the time occupied with production duties on the Netflix series The Witcher, was able to negotiate what has been described as a one-off arrangement with Warner Brothers Discovery. Cavill was paid $250,000 for his participation in the cameo. Johnson and his team reportedly spent years dating back to 2019 attempting to persuade Warner Bros. To bring Cavill back into the fold in some capacity. By the time the deal was finally approved, the film's production had already reached picture lock, meaning the only way to incorporate Cavill was through the flexible, self-contained space of a credit scene cameo rather than integrating him into the main narrative. The eventual return of Cavill's Superman carried considerable symbolic weight for longtime followers of the DCEU. Cavill had first taken on the role in 2013's Man of Steel and had continued playing the character across Batman v Superman, A Dawn of Justice, and the theatrical and subsequently reworked versions of Justice League, but had not appeared as Superman in any new footage in the years since. His absence had become something of an open question within fan and trade press discourse surrounding the future direction of the DCEU and the negotiations required to bring him back for even a brief cameo appearance reflect just how contractually and logistically complicated shared universe filmmaking of this kind had become by the early 2020s, with actors, studios, and competing creative visions for a character's future all needing to be aligned before a single new frame of footage could be shot. Filming principal photography on Black Adam began on April 10, 2021 at Trilith Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, with cinematographer Lawrence Sher behind the camera. Sher had previously shot Todd Phillips's Joker 2019 for the same studio, and his hiring was seen as a signal of the visual ambitions the filmmakers had for Black Adam's world. Bringing on a cinematographer associated with one of the most visually distinctive and critically acclaimed films in DC's recent history suggested an intent to give Black Adam, despite its blockbuster scale and effects-heavy set pieces, a level of photographic craft and visual specificity that went beyond the relatively flat, effects-driven coverage sometimes associated with large-scale franchise filmmaking of that period. As with so much of the film's development, the start of filming had already been pushed back considerably from its originally intended July 2020 start because of the ongoing disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Production moved forward through the spring and summer of 2021. On June 20, Johnson announced that the shoot had approximately 3 weeks of filming remaining, and by July 15, he confirmed that he had completed all of his own scenes as the title character. Filming did not conclude there, however. Additional material continued to be shot for several more weeks without Johnson's involvement, with some of the production relocating to Los Angeles during this period. The shoot officially wrapped by August 15, 2021, bringing the main phase of principal photography to a close after roughly 4 months. That 4-month window, spanning April through mid-August 2021, represented a fairly typical shooting schedule for a large-scale effects-driven superhero tentpole of that era, though the fact that Johnson himself completed his scenes well before the broader production wrapped reflects a common practice on ensemble films of this scale, in which the lead star's schedule is front-loaded so that secondary unit work supporting cast coverage and pickup shots can continue afterward without requiring the most in-demand and expensive member of the cast to remain on set for the full duration of the shoot. The film's now famous mid-credit sequence featuring Superman's return was constructed in a piecemeal fashion across several separate filming sessions rather than shot all at once. Johnson filmed his own portion of the scene at the tail end of a day dedicated to reshoots and additional photography. A subsequent segment was shot using a body double standing in for the Superman role, deliberately avoiding showing the actor's face on camera, since at that point in the process it was still uncertain whether Cavill's involvement could be finalized. Cinematographer Lawrence Sher later revealed that this incomplete version of the scene, without Cavill's actual participation, was shown during test screenings and received a strongly positive audience reaction, which in turn helped generate renewed momentum within the studio to secure Cavill for the part after all. Armed with that positive test audience data, Johnson took his case directly to Warner Bros. Motion Picture Group co-chairmen Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy, who ultimately signed off on bringing Cavill in. The final version of the scene, now featuring Cavill himself, was shot remotely in London in September 2022, barely a month before the film's theatrical premiere under the direct oversight of producer Hiram Garcia. Visual effects work played an outsized role in shaping the film's post-photography timeline, a reflection of just how central digitally rendered spectacle had become to the modern superhero genre by the early 2020s. Bill Westenhofer served as the film's visual effects supervisor, bringing experience from his earlier work on the 2017 DCEU installment Wonder Woman. Editing duties were handled by John Lee and Michael L. Sale. The scale of the effects workload required a broad coalition of specialist vendors, including Weta FX, UPP, Scanline VFX, Digital Domain, D Rodeo VFX, formerly Rodeo FX, Lola VFX, Cantina Creative, Tippett Studio, and the Italian studio EDI Effetti Digitali Italiani. Weta FX in particular was responsible for the film's climactic battle sequence, a set piece containing numerous shots that were rendered almost entirely through digital means rather than relying on practically filmed elements. The sheer number of visual effects vendors involved in the project, 10 separate houses spread across multiple countries, illustrates just how fragmented and globally distributed large-scale effects work had become within the modern blockbuster pipeline, by the early 2020s. Rather than relying on a single dominant effects house to handle the entirety of a film's digital work, major studios had increasingly come to split effects workloads across numerous specialized vendors, each often responsible for particular sequences, characters, or types of digital environments, a division of labor that allowed productions to hit tight release date deadlines, but that also introduced significant coordination challenges and, as would become evident in Black Adam's case, real scheduling risk when vendor capacity became strained industry-wide. Post-production. The demands of post-production visual effects work ended up having a direct and significant impact on the film's release timeline. In March 2022, Warner Bros. Adjusted its broader release calendar in response to the strain that pandemic-era disruptions had placed on the workload capacity of its various visual effects vendors across multiple simultaneous productions. As part of that reshuffling, Black Adam was pushed from its previously announced July 2022 date to October 2022, while two other DC titles, The Flash and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom, were bombed from their own late 2022 slots into 2023 to give their respective effects teams more breathing room. This kind of coordinated multi-title release date reshuffling had become an increasingly common occurrence across the film industry in the years following the onset of the pandemic, as studios grappled with a persistent backlog of post-production and effects work caused by facility shutdowns, staffing shortages, and remote work limitations that had disrupted normal production pipelines throughout 2020 and 2021, with the resulting bottlenecks continuing to ripple through release calendars well into 2022 and beyond, compounding the delay. Additional reshoots originally scheduled for February 2022 had to be postponed because most of the available soundstage space at Trilith's Studios was already occupied by production on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Only once that Marvel production wrapped its use of the facility could Black Adam's reshoots proceed. They finally began in early May 2022 and concluded roughly a month later in early June. These reshoots carried a real financial cost. The film had originally been greenlit with a budget of around $190 million. But by the time all the additional photography and related post-production work was accounted for, the final cost is reported to have swelled to as much as $260 million. Despite these late-stage complications, director Jaume Collet-Serra confirmed that the film had achieved picture lock, the point at which the edit is considered finalized, and no further changes to the shot sequence will be made by July 2022, leaving several months for sound design, color work, marketing tie-ins, and the final integration of visual effects shots before release. The escalation of the film's budget from its original $190 million greenlight figure to a reported final cost of as much as $260 million would go on to become a significant point of discussion. Once the film's box office performance came under scrutiny later in the year, since a budget increase of that magnitude directly raised the total revenue threshold the film would need to clear in order to be considered profitable. A dynamic explored further in the box office discussion below. The film's writing credits were finalized with Adam Shishkiel, Rory Haynes, and Sohrab Noshirwani listed as the credited screenwriters, while David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick, who had previously written the 2018 DCEU film Aquaman, received an additional credit for literary material contributed during the script's long development. In October 2022, in the final weeks before release, it was revealed that Jimon Hounsou and Jennifer Holland would both be reprising earlier DCEU roles within the film. Hounsou returning as the wizard Shazam from 2019's Shazam, and Holland returning as Emilia Harcourt, a character previously introduced in the Suicide Squad 2021 and the first season of the Peacemaker television series. One particularly notable detail to emerge from the post-production and ratings process was that the film initially received an R rating from the Motion Picture Association, largely because of the graphic nature of several death sequences depicted on screen. To secure the more commercially advantageous PG-13 rating that the studio ultimately wanted for a mass audience superhero tentpole, a considerable number of cuts and trims had to be made to soften or shorten those violent moments before the film's theatrical submission. This tension between the character's inherently violent, lethal nature and the commercial imperative to keep the finished film accessible to the widest possible teenage and family audience runs through much of the film's production and marketing history. Producer Hiram Garcia had, years earlier during the film's development, explicitly promised that the character would not be softened for mainstream audiences, and the film's early trailers leaned heavily into that same promise of unusual brutality for the genre. The ratings process, however, ultimately imposed real practical limits on how far that violent characterization could be pushed on screen while still remaining within the commercial boundaries of a PG-13 release, illustrating a broader tension that has recurred across numerous modern superhero films built around morally ambiguous or explicitly lethal protagonists. Music composer Lon Balfe was brought on to score Black Adam. Balfe's resume already included substantial ties to the broader DC cinematic landscape. He had previously contributed additional music to Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy and had composed the full score for the animated Lego Batman movie in 2017, giving him a working familiarity with both the weightier and more playful ends of DC's tonal spectrum heading into this project. By the time he came aboard Black Adam, Balfe had also built a substantial career scoring a wide range of major franchise films, and his selection for this project reflected the trust major studios had increasingly placed in a relatively small pool of prolific composers capable of delivering large-scale orchestral scores on the compressed post-production timelines typical of modern tentpole filmmaking. In the lead up to the film's release, two thematic singles from Balfe's score were issued separately through Water Tower Music, the label associated with Warner Brothers film scores. A theme built around the character of Black Adam himself was released as a single on September 30, 2022, followed shortly after by a separate theme representing the Justice Society. Released on October 5, 2022, the complete soundtrack album, gathering the full body of Balfe's score, was made available on October 21, 2022, the same day the film opened theatrically in the United States, a common release day strategy meant to capture fan attention at the peak of the film's cultural visibility. Releasing individual character-themed singles ahead of the full album has become a familiar promotional tactic within the franchise film scoring world more broadly, allowing a studio to generate standalone social media and streaming platform buzz around specific pieces of music tied to popular characters well before the complete score becomes available for fans wanting the full listening experience beyond Balfe's original score. The film also makes pointed use of a piece of pre-existing musical history during its pivotal mid-credits Superman scene, a rendition of John Williams's iconic Superman theme, first composed for Richard Donner's 1978 film. Henry Cavill later explained that this choice was made deliberately over an alternative option, a theme associated with Cavill's own earlier Superman films, composed by Hans Zimmer for 2013's Man of Steel, because the older Williams theme carried far greater instant recognizability with mainstream audiences, making it a more effective way to signal the character's return in a moment designed to land as an emotional and nostalgic punch for longtime fans of the wider Superman screen legacy. Cavill's comments on the subject came during a round of post-release press interviews in which he reflected candidly on both the music selection and the broader significance of the cameo appearance itself, framing the choice of theme as a considered decision made collaboratively with the filmmakers rather than an incidental or last-minute musical selection. The choice to reach back to Williams' decades-old theme rather than lean on the more contemporary Zimmer material associated with Cavill's own tenure in the role is notable in itself, since it suggested an implicit acknowledgement that the earlier, a more classical musical identity of the character carried greater emotional resonance with a broad mainstream audience than the specific scoring choices made for the character within the DCEU's own more recent films. In doing so, the mid-credit scene positioned itself as a piece of legacy-spanning fan service, drawing a direct musical line back to the character's original 1978 cinematic debut rather than reinforcing the more grounded, militarized sound that had come to define Superman's presentation earlier in the DCEU's run, deroulage theatrical long before the film's actual theatrical bow, Warner Bros. And the film's cast pursued an extended multi-year promotional campaign that tracked closely alongside the project's repeatedly shifting production and release timelines. Johnson used the virtual DC fandom event in August 2020 as an early promotional showcase, unveiling concept art and narrating an animated teaser reel for the film, while also using the platform to formally announce which members of the Justice Society would be appearing on screen. The film's since revised July 2022 release date was announced on March 28, 2021, accompanied by a new teaser narrated by Johnson that aired during an NCAA basketball tournament broadcast, and was further amplified through a promotional takeover of New York's Times Square, in which the announcement was broadcast over massive public screens and speakers in the heart of the district. Coverage of the stunt was largely favorable. A writer at the entertainment outlet Collider described the Times Square event as thrilling, while a technology-focused writer at CNET characterized broadcasting the announcement over a giant public speaker system as a genuinely striking way to reveal a film's release date to a live audience. The film received another promotional push at the 2021 edition of DC Fandom in October, where Johnson unveiled an opening scene from the film that formally introduced his take on the character. A writer at Collider expressed excitement at finally seeing footage from a project with such a long and winding development history, remarking that what had been shown looked very much like the kind of superhero film one would expect from Johnson, intended in context as a compliment regarding the footage's tone and scale. Coverage from other outlets, including the Wrap and the AV Club, focused specifically on the unusually high level of on-screen violence contained within that short teaser footage, while a writer at Polygon drew a tonal comparison between the footage and the atmosphere of the Mummy film franchise. suggesting an adventure horror hybrid sensibility to the material being previewed. In February 2022, additional footage was folded into a larger promotional showreel highlighting Warner Bros. Full slate of upcoming DC releases for the year, a lineup that at the time also included The Batman, The Flash, and Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom, though the latter two would later be pushed into 2023 as part of the broader visual effects driven scheduling shakeup described above. Johnson, along with co-stars Noah Centineo and Quintessa Swindell, appeared to promote the film at Warner Bros. Panel during CinemaCon in April 2022, an industry-facing convention where exhibitors and theater chains get early looks at upcoming studio releases, and a new teaser trailer debuted as part of that presentation. The first full official trailer arrived on June 8, 2022, distinguished in part by its use of an orchestral remix of the Kanye West and Jay-Z collaboration Murder to Excellence from their 2011 joint album. Coverage of the trailer frequently zeroed in on a character's moral ambiguity. A CNET writer characterized the footage as framing Black Adam as a character forced to choose between heroism and villainy, suggesting from his apparent stance on whether heroes should be willing to kill that he leans toward the darker of the two paths. Writers at both Collider and The Verge similarly noted the character's brutality as depicted in the trailer. The Verge's contributor felt that the depicted death of Adam's son serves as the radicalizing event that drives him toward using his powers for a form of justice so extreme that even his allies feel compelled to imprison him, while the Collider writer characterized Adam's morality as occupying a genuinely gray space between conventional notions of good and evil, expressing enthusiasm about where the character's arc might lead within the wider DCEU going forward. A writer at IGN likewise picked up on the tragic dimensions of the character's backstory as hinted at in the trailer, speculating that the film's take might draw inspiration from the character's more morally complex New 52 comic book incarnation, and suggesting that this backstory would prove central to shaping the character's choices throughout the film. The film's cast and director Colette Serra made a further promotional stop at the 2022 San Diego Comic-Con, where new exclusive footage was shown to a packed convention hall audience. A CNN writer compared the tone of this footage to that of the following year's Shazam Fury of the Gods, describing the Black Adam material as, if anything, even moodier by comparison. A writer at The Verge felt the footage leaned further into positioning Adam as a villain rather than a conventional anti-hero, observing that the Justice Society characters within the footage seemed considerably more focused on stopping him outright than on trying to recruit him into their ranks. A contributor at Polygon likewise drew attention to the confrontational dynamic between Adam and the JSA depicted in the footage, while a writer at Gizmodo praised the trailer's action sequences specifically, describing the material as a tightly packed, action-driven sizzle reel, tying into the Comic-Con promotional push. DC Comics also published a companion limited comic series titled Black Adam: The Justice Society Files, spotlighting each member of the JSA team individually. The series ran from July 5 through October 4, 2022, with each issue featuring a variant cover depicting the relevant JSA member as portrayed in the film. The film's marketing also included a tie-in partnership with ZOA Energy Drinks, which produced an exclusive branded edition of its product for distribution at the 2022 San Diego Comic-Con. Taken as a whole, the multi-year promotional rollout for Black Adam illustrates just how extended and incremental modern blockbuster marketing campaigns had become by the early 2020s. Rather than concentrating promotional activity in the weeks immediately preceding release, the studio and Johnson's own team spread awareness building efforts across more than 2 full years, mixing convention panels, sporting event tie-ins, social media driven announcements, and staggered trailer drops in a way designed to keep the project in the public conversation continuously through its repeated release date delays, effectively turning what might otherwise have looked like a troubled, repeatedly postponed production into an ongoing, actively anticipated event. Black Adam held its world premiere in Mexico City on October 3, 2022. In the weeks that followed, additional premiere and press screenings were staged across a range of major cities: New York City, Toronto, London, Atlanta, Miami, Madrid, and Los Angeles, running between October 12 and October 20, functioning as a rolling global promotional tour ahead of the wide theatrical opening. The film was then formally released in United States theaters on October 21, 2022, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. As detailed above, this release date represented the final stop on a long and winding journey. The film had originally been targeted for a December 2021 release before pandemic-related disruptions forced a postponement, after which it was rescheduled to July 29, 2022, only to be pushed once more to its eventual October date because of the visual effects workload pressures affecting Warner Bros.' broader 2022-2023 release slate, choosing to hold the film's international rolling premiere circuit across Mexico City, New York, Toronto, London, Atlanta, Miami, Madrid, and Los Angeles reflects the geographically expansive nature of a modern global blockbuster launch, in which studios attempt to generate localized press coverage and social media buzz across a widespread of major media markets and key international territories in the days immediately preceding a wide release, rather than concentrating premiere activity in a single city. The decision to hold the very first premiere in Mexico City ahead of any US event also reflects the increasing commercial importance that Latin American markets had come to hold for major Hollywood tentpole releases by the early 2020s, a significance later borne out by the film's unusually strong opening performance across several countries in that region. Discussed further below, home media following its theatrical run, Black Adam moved to video on demand platforms on November 22, 2022, giving audiences the option to rent or purchase the film digitally roughly a month after its cinema debut. It subsequently arrived on the HBO Max streaming service on December 16, 2022, making it available to subscribers as part of their existing service rather than requiring an additional purchase. The roughly month-long gap separating the theatrical release from the digital purchase window, followed by a further gap before the film reached the flagship in-house streaming platform, reflected the layered distribution windowing strategy that had become standard practice among major studios by the early 2020s. This approach allowed a studio to maximize revenue by first capturing theatrical box office receipts, then premium transactional digital sales and rentals, before finally making the title available at no additional cost to subscribers of its own streaming service, a sequencing designed to protect each successive revenue stream from cannibalizing the ones that preceded it. The film performed strongly across multiple digital storefronts during this window. It ranked in the #1 position on iTunes for its first 2 weeks of digital release, and it held the top spot on both Google Play and Vudu for a full 4 weeks. It also debuted at the top of Redbox's digital rental charts. Despite this strong performance across purchase and rental platforms, streaming viewership data compiled by the audience measurement firm Samba TV indicated that the film was watched by approximately 2 million viewers in the United States on HBO Max during its first 3 days of availability. They're a figure that reportedly lagged behind the comparable streaming debut viewership of a number of other recent superhero releases on rival platforms. This disparity between the film's strong performance on transactional platforms, where consumers were actively choosing to pay for individual access to the title, and its comparatively softer performance on the included with subscription analysts streaming platform, is a pattern that on pointed to when evaluating a film's genuine underlying audience to sample demand versus its performance on a service where viewers face no direct additional cost to sample a title. The strength of Black Adam's numbers on iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, and Redbox suggests a dedicated core audience willing to actively pay for the film even after its theatrical run had concluded. While its relatively modest 3-day HBO Max viewership hints at a narrower crossover into the platform's broader, less genre-committed subscriber base. Physical media editions followed in the new year. The film arrived on DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray formats on January 3, 2023. The premium tier of the digital release, along with the 4K and Blu-ray combo pack editions, was bundled with 10 separate bonus special features for fans interested in behind-the-scenes content. According to sales tracking compiled by the market research firm the NPD Group, Black Adam ended up being the single highest selling title on physical home media formats in the United States for that particular month. A notable achievement, even as overall physical media sales across the industry continued their long-term decline in the streaming era. That the film managed to top physical sales charts despite the broader industry-wide contraction of the DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K Ultra HD market underscores the continued, if shrinking, existence of a dedicated collector and enthusiast audience for major studio franchise releases, a segment of consumers who continued to place value on physical ownership, bonus special features, and premium disc-based audio and video quality, even as the majority of casual viewers had, by that point, shifted the bulk of their home viewing habits towards streaming and digital rental platforms. Reception box office globally, Black Adam grossed a combined total of $393. 3 million at the worldwide box office, broken down into $168.2 million earned across the United States and Canada, and a further $225. 1 million generated across international markets outside that region. That international domestic split, with roughly 57% of the film's total revenue coming from markets outside the United States and Canada, is broadly in line with the pattern seen across much of modern studio blockbuster filmmaking, in which international box office receipts have increasingly come to represent the majority share of a major franchise release's overall theatrical earnings, reflecting the growing importance that Hollywood studios have placed on international audiences when greenlighting and marketing large-scale genre productions. In its domestic release, the film opened alongside two other new wide releases, the romantic comedy Ticket to Paradise and the Martin McDonagh drama The Banshees of Inisherin, and had been projected ahead of release to earn somewhere in the range of $58 to $68 million from an opening footprint of 4,402 theaters. The film exceeded expectations on its first day, taking in $26.7 million, a total that included $7.6 million generated from Thursday night preview screenings, comfortably outpacing the $20.4 million opening day total posted by Shazam. Several years earlier, over the course of its full opening weekend, Black Adam grossed $67 million domestically, marking the highest opening weekend of Johnson's career as a leading actor up to that point, and the film comfortably claimed the number one position at the domestic box office for that weekend. This also stood as the fifth highest October opening weekend recorded by any film in box office history to that point. That the film managed to post the highest opening weekend of Johnson's career specifically underscores the effectiveness of positioning him as the soul above the title draw for the project, a strategy that had been the central bet underlying the entire Black Adam production since the character was first split off from Shazam back in 2017.
Beating Shazam.
As own opening day numbers also carried a degree of narrative significance for the studio. Since the two properties had been deliberately separated years earlier on the theory that Johnson's star power alone could support a larger opening than a hero-centered film built around a less established leading performer, and the early box office results appeared, at least in the short term, to validate that original strategic wager. The film's box office trajectory in subsequent weeks followed a pattern of steep front-loaded decline that has become increasingly common for major franchise tentpoles in the post-pandemic theatrical marketplace. In its second weekend, Black Adam dropped 59% to a gross of $27.5 million, though it remained in first place at the box office despite the sharp fall off. The third weekend brought a comparatively gentler decline of 33%, with the film earning $18.3 million. By its fourth weekend, the drop steepened again to 56%, with the film earning $8.1 million and being knocked out of the top box office position by the arrival of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which dominated the marketplace through the following weeks of the award season corridor. This steep pattern of weekend over weekend decline, a 59% drop immediately following what had been a record opening weekend for the star, reflects a front-loaded box office trajectory that had become increasingly common for major franchise releases in the years following the pandemic, as marketing campaigns concentrated audience turnout heavily into a film's first several days of release, with word of mouth and critical reception playing an outsized role in determining whether a film could sustain momentum into subsequent weekends. In Black Adam's case, the combination of mixed critical notices and the film's crowded competitive positioning against the arrival of a major Marvel release just weeks later appears to have compounded an already steep natural drop-off. Internationally, Black Adam earned $75.9 million across its first 5 days of release, spanning 76 countries, a performance that included several standout regional results. It posted the third highest opening ever for a Warner Bros. Release, specifically within Latin America during the ongoing pandemic-affected box office era in Malaysia, where it earned $2 million, in Indonesia, where it earned $2.9 million, and in the Philippines, where it earned $1 million. The film registered the single highest opening ever recorded for a Warner Bros. Title in each respective market during that same pandemic era window. Taiwan, with an opening of $2 million, delivered the biggest opening of any Warner Brothers film released in 2022 in that territory, and represented the second biggest opening of Johnson's leading career in that specific market. In Brazil, the film's $4 9 million opening, ranked as the second biggest Warner Bros. Opening of the pandemic era in that country, while in India it's $3. 5 million opening, ranked as the fifth biggest opening ever recorded for a Warner Brothers title in that market. Momentum slowed considerably in subsequent international weekends. The second international weekend brought in 39 million now, a drop of 45%, followed by a third weekend total of 26.2 million all, representing a 34% decline, and a fourth weekend total of $9.3 million, a steep 63% drop. In Japan specifically, the film opened to a comparatively modest 1.2 million weekend, reflecting the persistent challenges Hollywood's superhero properties have often faced in that particular market relative to their performance elsewhere. Considered together, the film's especially strong performance across several Southeast Asian and Latin American markets, set against its comparatively modest results in Japan, points to a geographically uneven pattern of audience reception, with certain regional markets responding far more enthusiastically to Johnson's star power and the character's action-driven marketing than others. Such regional variance is a familiar feature of major franchise blockbusters generally, often shaped by a complex mix of local star recognition, competing domestic and regional film releases, and differing audience tastes regarding the specific style of action filmmaking on display. Despite the film's respectable headline worldwide total, its enormous production budget, inflated substantially by the costly reshoots detailed earlier, led numerous industry publications to characterize the film as a box office disappointment, if not an outright box office bomb. The Hollywood Reporter stated bluntly that the film would be fortunate to merely break even once all ancillary revenue streams were factored in. Variety went further, estimating that the film stood to lose somewhere between $50 million and $100 million, against what the outlet calculated to be a break-even threshold in the neighborhood of $600 million. Warner Brothers pushed back publicly against these figures, stating that the film's initial break-even point had actually been calculated at approximately $450 million, and that even that lower figure had subsequently declined further thanks to growing ancillary revenue from home media sales and a marketing spend that the studio characterized as comparatively modest. Deadline Hollywood offered a considerably more optimistic financial assessment, estimating that the film would ultimately turn a profit somewhere in the range of $52 million to $72 million. That more favorable projection rested on several assumptions. A marketing budget estimated at only $80 million to $100 million, kept comparatively low, in part because Johnson's enormous personal social media following was seen as absorbing a significant share of the promotional workload that would otherwise have required paid media spend. Rising ancillary revenue from premium video on demand and streaming licensing, and the fact that no talent or financing partners were entitled to a percentage share of the box office gross itself. A later report from the media outlet Puck complicated this picture further, indicating that several Warner Brothers executives suspected Johnson and members of his team of having leaked a financial summary to Deadline Hollywood that reporters there relied upon, and that this document allegedly contained a number of inaccuracies, including a mischaracterized marketing budget figure, an inflated projection of home entertainment revenue, and an incorrect interest rate applied to the film's financing.